Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Humanity's Voice. I know I have not done great about getting these out every week, but it's just been very busy. I have an amazing guest. I've actually been talking with her for some time. I haven't seen anything like this before. Well, I have and I haven't. She's an amazing woman. Her name is Lizzie, and she has been put illegally into a conservatorship. And she's got a pretty epic story. So I want to introduce her, but before I bring her on, I just want to let everyone know that this is not a podcast or for children. Children shouldn't be listening. So if you have any children or small ears around, I ask you not listen and maybe listen later. And I also want to say that this could be a trigger warning because her story does have some pretty intense things in it. And so if you are a survivor of abuse and maybe not are healed, this could be a complete trigger for you. So I'm just going to bring her in and let her tell her story. And I ask everyone, whether you believe it or not, I ask you to not be hateful or ugly. We're just going to block you. My passion is for these women that have gone through horrific things and are still going through horrific things and bring awareness around it. So if you're not supportive or anything like that, we're just going to block the trolls because frankly, I'm over it. And we're going to block the religious spirits too, because I'm over them as well. So I'm going to bring on Lizzie. Hi, Lizzie.
Hi.
How are you?
Good. Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Of course, you look beautiful today. You're like that.
It's an overcast Sunday up here, which is, kind of feels like on repeat in my life right now, given what everything is, what I've been going through. But
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate your advocacy, and I appreciate that you highlight these stories because people really need to understand what's going on and how this is happening in plain view and the roles that we're playing to help perpetuate these types of abuses that we don't realize that are necessarily happening in our backyard.
Yes. Well, I was amazed. So everyone, Lizzie reached out to me on Instagram and she had sent me like a mountain of evidence of what she was going through. And I was overwhelmed by reading it and looking at it. My heart just kind of broke for her because like people aren't listening. And if people don't know, Lizzie actually was on Stu Peters' show talking about this as well. So I'm like, well, I'm going to grab her up because I want her to tell her story here. And so, Lizzie, I'm just going to kind of let you go and just tell us, kind of what you want to tell us with what's happening with you.
Sure. And my apologies if I've been left without housing by my husband since June 5th of 2020. So I'm always kind of moving catch can. So my apologies if I have to adjust my camera, if my camera keeps falling here. I've got some strung up little contraptions.
No, you're okay.
But sure. So yeah, my story is pretty heartbreaking. I am a mom of three, stayed home mother for 17 and a half years, Columbia University graduate. I was a previous ER ICU nurse. I was a hospital administrator and at NYU in a hospital for joint disease in New York City. And then I used to run the Northeast division of a private healthcare company that did a startup program. It was based out of Cedars-Sinai, and they in LA, and they started on the East Coast. So that's what I was doing before I had children. Then I became a stay-at-home mom for 17 and a half years, very involved in my children's multiple schools, and no history, no criminal history, no psychiatric history, just on no medications.
You ran a hospital. I mean, that's huge.
And my father, I was an administrator, so I was running departments within the hospital. I wasn't the CEO. I have a lot of. My husband's always trying to just the only excuse that they have is she's a liar and she's crazy when you are exposing the truth so clearly, and so I try to have very strong integrity with my words, and I don't want to exaggerate any little bit because my story is so horrific enough. It doesn't need any exaggeration. Yeah. So anyway, 17 and a half years, I was, like I said, very involved in my children's private school, and I had just recently, I had built one brand new home in Briarcliff, and and did a complete gut renovation, you know, both in the millions of dollars, and was responsible for all of our family's multi-million dollar assets, housing, major purchases, finances, taxes, you know, paying our employees, paying our employee taxes, whatever it may be, that was me. That's what I did in our family. And my husband was a lawyer, and he worked, and he came home, and I took care of everything else, right? And that's how it was up until the point of May of 2020, when I had, well, actually, it didn't change until June of 2020, but in May of 2020, I had found out that my husband, who had a lifelong history of pedophilia and himself was molested as a child, I discovered evidence that my husband himself was a pedophile, that it wasn't something I could no longer just attribute to all of the bizarre things that happened with him. I used to just like attribute to Stockholm syndrome and be like, oh, well, that was because, you know, he had that experience as a kid, and so he doesn't know better. And then now, in May of 2020, I realized, like, it was the first time that I saw evidence that I considered that, like, I was left with no other option but then to realize that my husband himself was a predator. And I found his online pedophilia content and sexual solicitation of minors. And it just, I went into mama bear mode. Like, okay, my whole life makes sense now. I can see my husband preying on my children. I can see my husband's gaslighting of me. I can see his explosive outbursts. I can see why he freaked out in 2013 when I started advocating about pedophilia, why he went batshit on me all the time, and like how that caused such tumultuous relationships in our family for a bit. I could see how he would triangulate with me. I could see how he was forcing me and our children to believe that there was something wrong with us, and that, you know, we needed psychological help, like all the stuff that never quite, I couldn't put into the picture of like, why is my Yale Law School really kind, nice husband have all this stuff going on? And then I was like, oh my God, this man has a secret life. This is his lifestyle. And I just had like underneath my notes in my own home. And
how did you find it? Did you find it, like, was it on the computer? Is that how you found what he was doing?
Yeah, so it's a long story, but the short story is at that time in May of 2020, there was it was when the COVID lockdowns and stuff started happening, and I was a very strong advocate against the lockdowns, and I started doing some of my own research and discovered that I started reading more about this type of activity and about people being locked in the home with their abusers, and how awful that was, and how basically not only were the kids now exposed to constant abuse, but they didn't have an outlet where they would like go to school or go to their after school sport or go somewhere and somebody would say, hey, you don't seem right, what's going on? And then there would be a way for somebody within the community to start seeing the abuse, and right. So I started learning more and more about it, and I started reading more and more about, you know, these types of abuses. And then like little flags first started going off my head. I was like, wait, like things that wouldn't think about, like, so pausing now. Did you just have that happen too?
It was freezing.
Okay.
Yeah. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
So I just started I started reading more about it, and I started realizing that some of those red flags that they talked about, children with anxiety, children having physiological effects, like whether it be throwing up or allergies or, little things like I found out, like walking on the toes, all these little things started like coming into play. And I was like, oh, well, that's happens in my life, and that happens in here, and that happens in here. And my husband does have a history where he was abused, and he kept in touch with his abuser his whole life, and he saved his abuser's love letters, even up until the time, when he was at Davis Polk. He's like keeping the love letters of a pedophile to his teenage self. I was like, wait, what? Why would he keep these, right? But I knew that back in 1999. But all of these things I put in my brain. I said, oh, well, these things make sense because he was abused and he's got Stockholm syndrome. So he loves his abuser. So he can't break out of that cycle with his abuser, which is true, but not the whole truth. The whole truth was that my husband was also a predator, and that
Lizzie, say
I
that
had
again.
issues
You
with pedophilia, and he saw me, advocating when I found it.
say
I'm
that
sorry.
again. You cut out. You said I
Oh,
heard 1999 and then it cut out.
oh God, it's so weird how this. Yeah. Then
Listen,
this
everyone
often
wants to
happens,
know
right?
the communication with her. They have tried to cut it. It has been the weirdest thing I have seen in my entire life. And like this, they do not want this woman's story out. I just want to be very clear. It is crazy. So there's probably going to be more delays like that. We'll do our best, and we do intend to do another part 2 of this. So we'll do our best to make sure if she cuts out, I'll let her know so we can hear it. But guys, this is like a really hard reality and truth, and they don't want her story out. So go ahead, Lizzie.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is they've taken down. I've had I think like 9 different Instagram social media accounts. I had my Facebook account, which I had for 15 years. There are accounts that are set up now by other people, but when I try to access them on my devices, it doesn't allow me to access one of them. It allows me on another one to access on other accounts. So it has been, and I've had these accounts, like I said, my Facebook account I have for 15 years, no problems. All of a sudden, I start talking about my husband, who's a powerful lawyer, the evidence of his pedophilia, and then the evidence of his use of the courts and the cops to try and get a false diagnosis of me to give him a cover for his pedophilia, and into the ultimate form of coercive control and power, which was that he had me trafficked into an illegal guardianship of property. I mean,
Well, can you
it's
explain
sick.
that to us? That's crazy. So you're in one now, right?
Correct.
So you
Correct. It's
explain that what that is for people that are listening
sure.
and how you got
Mm-hmm.
there?
Yep. And so these programs are called different things in different states. In New York, it's called a guardianship. In other states, it's called a conservatorship. But I'm only going to speak about the New York. In New York, this is under New York Mental Health and Hygiene Law, Section 81. Okay. So in Article 81 proceeding is a guardianship proceeding over an incapacitated person. Now, I encourage everybody to look up New York State MHY, which stands for Mental Health and Hygiene Law, Article 81. It's maybe 12 pages, right? So when you think of the amount of control, maybe it's a little more than that, but it's thin. And when you think about the amount of control that they are able to ascertain over somebody else, over somebody else's life, the level, I mean, they have my social security number, they can determine where I'm buried. Like, I mean, it's sick. And to think that there are not more very clear, very specific guidelines around this, and then that the lean is towards protecting the rights of the person, right? It's not that at all. Like this is a mechanism. The intent of these laws is to put somebody in full control and take their assets and get custody of children. And you can see in all of the public cases that you guys have probably been aware of, the most common, of course, is the Free Britney case. It starts with the custody. Okay, that issue. Do what we tell you. Go to these psych hospitals. Get these psychiatric evaluations, or you're not going to see your kids. Right.
Yeah.
That is one of the most common, coercive, and corrosive practices of the court is the use of our children as a pawn, as a carrot, to say we're going to withhold access to your very own children until you do what we tell you to do. And then when you do what we tell you to do, we're going to have these appeals to authority. We're going to have these fake experts create a narrative that we want. We're going to manufacture the probable cause. We're going to just have the pay to have like a particular story put in place here. And that's it. I mean, these guardianships have become so obviously a mechanism of corruption, a mechanism by which to seize somebody's assets, children, homes, life, freedoms. It's sick and sadistic. And so now we have a man. My husband's name is Brian Stryker Weinstein. Okay. He is on the Duke University Keenan Institute for Ethics. Okay. That's important because I want you to understand Duke University, the board of directors, the board of the Ethics Institute, they all have the information, the evidence of my husband's pedophilia. They have his acknowledgement of it in text and writing. They have his lifelong history of it. They have letters where he's talked about his abuse as a child, right? He's, Ron Barry. It's freezing again, right?
It is.
Are you back?
There you go. Go
Okay.
ahead. We heard the majority
Okay.
of it.
So
it was good. So start with Ron Barry.
Okay. So Duke University has evidence of my husband's pedophilia, acknowledgement in writing, talking about it in videos, acknowledgement that he was going to stay away from children and that he wanted the practice to stop. And then they also have evidence that my competency is self-evident. Competency is assumed. So we don't go around saying, hey, you prove to me that you're competent. Hey, you prove to me that you're competent. Hey, legally and lawfully, your competency is assumed until you have proven, right? Until the accuser has proven that there has been something that has occurred where you have caused such damage to yourself or others that they are saying you are incapacitated and unable to function. So that's important to note because everything that we do in life, like when you go and buy gas, technically you're not buying gas. You are committing a contract to buy gas, right? So when you go and you pump my gas and I pay you, that's a contract. You pump the gas and then you give them the money and then that's the fulfillment of the contract. You can't enter into contracts unless you are capable and unless you're competent and capable, if you're incapacitated. So the assumption is always of capacity. The assumption is always that you are competent, okay? And this trafficking into a guardianship was done with nothing other than the say-so of my husband and people who were either defendants or nefarious related parties in a federal case that I had, in multiple federal cases that I had. So imagine this. Somebody does something wrong to you. You sue them in federal court. Then they go and apply for guardianship over you. They get a guardian, and then the guardian goes back to federal court, withdraws the cases against your defendant, seizes your assets, negotiates for custody of your children, and withdraws your divorce case. It's absolutely atrocious. And why is this happening? Because my husband is a powerful lawyer, and there are only two delusions. I mean, there's only two options in his life. I have to make people think that she's crazy. Otherwise, she knows I'm a pedophile, and everybody's going to understand that I'm a pedophile, and I've got no other option. So I am going to go nuclear on her. I'm going to do something that's so ridiculous that people will have to say, oh, well, there must be something legitimate to that, because how could that happen otherwise, right? It challenges everything that we know about guardianship. So, and about the courts and about our law. So therefore, people assume there must be something to what he's saying, right? Because this can't happen in America, right? And then you're like, no, this is exactly what's happening in America.
It's like legalized. This is like another form of legalized trafficking, human trafficking. What did they accuse you of? Like, what was his, like, what did he accuse you of? Because I know it's crazy. And so what, like, yeah. I know everyone's asking, like, what did he accuse you to get you there?
Yep. So it's a great question. And so let's just make it clear. We're going to put all of these documents online, actually, because I don't want people to believe a word I'm saying. Not one word.
Wait a minute. Wait, let me stop you there, though. Even if she didn't have documents, I want to be very clear. Even if she didn't have documents, I would believe her. I believe her. And no one should ever ask for proof. I get like a conservatorship and different things are different, but no one should ask for proof because these people, especially people that are worth millions and millions of dollars, have the money to bury it and make her look, as they say, crazy, which she is not. She is of sound mind, and make her look. So I just want to be very clear, because I know that a lot of people are like, oh, where are the receipts? Where are the receipts? Even if you didn't have those, I want you to know that I would believe you, and I do believe you. So go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off. I just wanted to be clear. So go ahead and tell us what was the reason that they.
I think that.
Oh, Lizzie, it froze. Sorry, guys. Give us 1 second. It's like right when you get into the part where. Give us a second here, guys. This is how it works. They don't want the truth out, so they stop it.
I think you're frozen again.
Yep. Are you frozen? Was I frozen? Lizzie? Lizzie? You're frozen. If you need to go out and come back in, you can, if you can hear me. The censorship on the truth is just crazy, guys. Let me see if I'm going to remove her and bring her back in, see if that works. Remove. Lizzie? Okay, I'm going to send her a message, guys. Give me 1 second here. Okay, I'm sure she'll come back in. So let's just give it a second. This is what's so crazy is that when you have like something like this, that is so outrageous and the like theft of your freedom. And then they just want to silence you and censor you. It's beyond like on another level of crazy. I'm just texting her, tell her she can make sure she can come back in. Welcome to Joe B's America with the censorship and craziness. And I have seen all, everyone that's watching, I have seen her documents and it's crazy. And the fact that someone has to go through what she's going through right now, it's just another form of enslavement, and it's ridiculous. No one should have to. I mean, you're watching her, listening to her. She's not crazy, as they like to say, or a lunatic. She's a sound mind. She can communicate well. I mean, for goodness sake, she was a nurse. She put her credentials out there of what she did. She ran departments. Here, she's back in.
I'm having a hard time. Let me see if I can find. Hold on 1 second. Is there? I'm trying to just go to a different area in my friend's home.
You're fine.
To see if I have. I have no place to put this. Okay, can you put me backstage for a minute so I can?
Oh, sure. All right, guys. Let's give her a second so she can get set up. But like I said, this is just, obviously Britney Spears was like the biggest conservatorship that we've heard of, but this happens on a daily basis. And Lizzie, if you can hear me, just give me a thumbs up when you're ready to come back in. Technical difficulties. Just give me a thumbs up when you're ready. Apologies, guys. She's trying to get it. I know that the internet's cutting in and out for her, so. You good? All right, she's good. Okay. Awesome. Okay.
Okay.
Wow.
Awesome. These are
the truth. I was just telling the audience, I was like, the truth is just the censorship on the truth is like great, like on another level. So
this is
so you look great. You're fine. Take a breath. I know it's kind of crazy. So we were at what did they accuse you of to put you into the conservatorship?
Yes. So this is what's ridiculous. They say that I have functional limitations. And I was like, okay, what are they? They won't tell me.
You look functional to me.
Yeah, I have functional limitations. So I've had neurological tests done to show them like what they want. They're like, go see a psychiatrist. No, I don't need to see a psychiatrist any more than you, sir, need to go see OBGYN to take a pregnancy test right now. Why don't you? Which is, I guess, is a whole nother story now that we're talking about, that level of,
Crazy.
yes, right.
Yeah.
We're not going to get on to that topic, but the bottom line is these people can say and do anything. They say you have functional limitations. One of the things they said is you don't appreciate the you don't appreciate the power of the court. So this is the only way to help you. Really? And you're right. Like when I see that the court is not a mechanism of justice, but the court is being used as a mechanism of coercion, extortion, and trafficking. The court is used to kidnap children. That the court is used to take away people's assets without due process. I want to make it clear. I have never, ever, 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 ever been found guilty of anything. I have no crimes against me. I've never been allowed a trial on anything. They have taken my children, my homes, my assets, all of my belongings, right? Like this hat, the shirt, you're going to see me in a lot of the interviews in the same clothing because I have one bag of clothes. It's been 2 years. I'm a multimillionaire, right? I don't have access to any of my belongings. And my story, which I'm like, oh my God, this is like a horrific story. Wait until people hear my unique story. The worst part about my story is it's not unique. The worst part about my story is I start telling people about it and they're like, oh yeah, I've got a friend that's happening to her too. Oh yeah, people were reaching out to me in mass to be like, yeah, this is what the courts are used for. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, don't you just go to court and you tell the judge the truth and you show them all the evidence and then they slam the gavel and justice is done? Like, isn't that what we learned from Hollywood? Isn't that what we taught, right? That cops hate pedophiles. And they just, slam the book at them. And then you realize, no, actually, our courts are the mechanisms by which they protect pedophilia. Yeah. Our courts are the mechanisms by which they traffic victims to pedophiles. Yeah. And the judges themselves are. And we're seeing this in our U.S. Supreme Court justice nominees, right? We're seeing a strong, knowing focus. They're saying to the public, we willfully promote, aid, and abet pedophilia.
Well, Lizzie,
go ahead.
Let me stop you there. Let's go back real quick to when they put you and they said, what was it? It was functional what?
That I have functional limitations. Yeah.
So like walk us through that. Like, did you how did you get there? Did you go because you didn't have a trial. So something had to happen that you just stopped.
They had a trial without me. So this is what happened. I'm going to give a quick wow. I know you'll have questions, but let me just kind of get the blurb because I think we could focus on this show. We could focus on my children being kidnapped and trafficked. We can focus on the use of police to kidnap and traffic children. We could focus on the use of the court to steal assets and go into all of the ways that happens, like from when you submit your papers into how, we could go through all of these things, but what you and I are discussing, we're going to focus on the most is this issue of conservatorship. So let me give you the
part 2, part 3.
Yeah, so let me give you the background because I know we've already been on for a while, even though we've had the, let me give you the back, and you've got 45 minutes total for today. So let me give you the background of what happened. And then we'll go. So the short story is May of 2020. And again, I know you're going to have questions, but we'll try and...
You go. I won't cut you off. Go ahead.
Okay. May of 2020, I found out my husband was a pedophile. My children, who were 17, almost 16 and 13 at the time, and I sat down and confronted him on May 20th of 2020. Okay. We confronted him in a soft stepping kind of way to say, look, you've got this lifelong history. We see what you're doing. We know what's happening now. Do you want to get better? Do you want to make it stop? And do you promise not to hurt the kids or I or not? But you're not fooling us anymore. We're on to you. We know what's going on. Mr. Yale Law School, Duke AB scholar, partner at Davis Polk and Wardwell, and now on the board at Duke University for their Keenan Ethics Institute. And my husband at the time acknowledges his pedophilia, acknowledges that he will stay away from children, and that he wants it to stop. Okay. And so in my naive, stupid way, I'm associating those things with the man that I thought that he was that I had known and been married to, for 18 years at that point. Okay. This is like you have to understand how quickly this all happened, where like everything crumbled at once. Right. So I believe him. Instead, what he does is the next day he goes missing and he goes on a campaign to try to have me kidnapped and put into a psychiatric facility to give him a cover for his pedophilia, because that's all he needs, right? In our messed up society, all they have to do is say, she's lying, she's crazy, and have the thinnest house of cards, the thinnest plausible deniability. And people will say, okay, let's go with that. Because the real truth that we live amongst these pedophiles, and somebody like Brian S. Weinstein, who we have known and loved, and he seems so nice. That's just a hard truth we don't want to deal with. So we'd rather say that there's another truth here, right? So he then goes missing. He hires a company, O'Connor Professional Group. He signs contracts with them to have me kidnapped by the police and then trafficked into a psychiatric facility. He sends them, he pays for it on my credit card by mistake. Then he sends them a list of places to take me using my name. So now we're talking about a contract to kidnap and imprison somebody, okay? While he's sending me at the same time text messages, because he was missing, and I had his iPhone and his iPad at home, and I'm getting these messages coming in on my Amex saying that I'm getting like these $5,000 charges from these companies that I don't know anything about. And I looked them up and they're like, oh, we offer services for when your family is in need. Are you in need of psychiatric care for a relative of yours and you want help getting it? We can do that for you. And what they mean is, you want to take somebody who knows about your crimes and you want to put them in a facility to give you a cover? We can do that. Wow. We're for hire service. Okay. Diana Clark, O'Connor Professional Group, he contracts with her. He sends her a list of places to take me using my name and a doctor that was his doctor, Dr. Catherine Michaels, that Brian had coerced me into going with him to see in 2013, when I had first started becoming a loud advocate against pedophilia. Okay. Looking back on that now, I know my husband was having a breakdown because he's a pedophile and I'm advocating against pedophilia, and he's freaking the fuck out. Like, how do I, excuse my language, but how do I cover for her? And instead what happens is when I'm, I realize it's not that he's in Stockholm syndrome, it's that he's trying to cover his ass, right? So anyway, so Dr. Michaels, they then send him this Dr. Cynthia Lang, who's from Florida. You can look her up. Cynthia Last, I'm sorry, Last, then sends Brian HIPAA forms. These are all people totally unknown to me, totally unethical, right? But you can't like make opinions and stuff. So they send him HIPAA forms, patient information sheets, another contract for stuff with her. He starts filling those out. Then at the same time, he's sending me messages. I was like, Brian, are you trying to put me in a psychiatric facility? Are you literally this stupid? You think that I'm going to that anybody's going to believe that this is a psychiatric issue because you're a pedophile and I'm telling people about it now? And he's like, Lizzie, I would never do that. You're of sound mind. You're of no threat to yourself or others. And you should have this from me in writing. So this will give you comfort. And this is what the best gaslighters do. They set up this false sense of security so that you live in a delusion that something can't happen. And because you believe it can't happen, you don't protect yourself from it. And that is why it's so important that my story get out, that people understand that this is a normal practice of predators, of abusers, of pedophiles to use and abuse these very purposely loose mental health and hygiene laws, so that they can put you in jail. And when I say jail, I mean these psychiatric facilities, which are worse than jail, because they then can inject you with things. They then can take medical control over your person, which is so much more egregious than just being locked in a cell. Not that being in jail was bad, and that happened too. But this is now it's a different type of predatory practice by them, right? So this use of we need to understand the level at which that this is occurring in general in our society. And it's one of the things that we should become familiar with. It's a term, the Martha Mitchell effect. The Martha Mitchell effect. Martha Mitchell was one of the wives, I think, for the U.S. Attorney General, but I could be wrong about that, during the time of Watergate. And she was telling people about it. She used to like to have a couple cocktails and call the reporters and start telling people about what was going on. And in order to shut her up and discredit her, they started saying she was crazy and then trafficking her into Silver Hill in Connecticut, which was a psychiatric facility, which is one of the places that my husband contracted with in my particular case. And you'll see those documents for yourself. And in return, the psychiatrists and psychologists were like, oh, well, we believed that she was crazy, because who would think that the president would really do this? And it's a psychiatric, it's a term for when a clinician truly believes that a person is so crazy because they don't really look at the evidence. The story just sounds so fantastical that it must be untrue. Okay. So we should all be familiar with the Martha Mitchell effect. And when you start hearing somebody accuse you of being crazy or accuse you of having psychiatric syndromes when you're telling the truth, most of us have been conditioned in our life to not validate ourselves. Most of us have been conditioned in our life to be told, because we've been raised by predators. And so we then end up married to predators, which we don't realize, but like that's the cycle. And so we've spent our whole life going, no, 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 no. What I'm saying is true. You can ask Susie. She'll confirm it. You can ask, so Chris will tell you too. John, this idea that we constantly have to have people validate the experience because our word will not be taken is because we've been indoctrinated into that our whole lives. And one of the things I want victims to start doing is being able to be so self-reliant, to understand how to document what's happening in real time so that you do have evidence, but also how to stand in your truth so that when these people do come at you, and they're like, oh, you're crazy and you're a liar, instead of being like, oh, no, I'm not. Let me tell you how I'm not. You're like, huh, hit a nerve, did I? Found the truth, right? That's all you got? Really?
Yeah.
The lame, lazy, boring, you're just going to call me crazy with no evidence? And that's what Brian did. And then the next step that we really need to understand as a society is how our judges have a knowing practice of using these mental health and hygiene laws to take children away, to take homes away, to take assets away, and to punish you if you expose the system, which is what I've been doing. Okay.
Lizzie, how long were you in the hospital for, and how'd you get out?
Let me get to that, because that sounds so weird to say. And let's just be clear. I was never before, no psychiatric history, right?
No.
I have nothing at all, right? Never. And then all of a sudden, and we're jumping ahead, but I filed a federal lawsuit against a village judge. And it's in the village where my husband was a board member. So he has this village judge writing orders, and then he's got dirty cops enforcing these orders. And then I'm never allowed access to the court to be heard. And these are orders that prevent me access to my home, to my children, to my belongings, my dog, everything, right? With all no probable cause, not even an accusatory instrument filed at the time by my husband. Like, it's sick. So all I'm asking for is a trial to be heard. And instead, the judge has me put in prison for not wearing a mask in a public building. And that was in January. I was filing documents within the village, January 4th of 2021. And we're kind of getting out of order, so this might,
You're good.
But so that happened January 4th of 2021 to January 9th. I got out of that. I then filed a federal lawsuit in the Southern District of New York. That case number is 7-21-CV-01996. Okay. Anybody can look that up on the internet and look up, if you can, my original documents, but I'm going to send it to you, because what's interesting is when you read my motion and then you read how a federal judge interprets and describes it, you will see the blatant lies by a federal judge. And that to me was a whole nother level. Yeah, I expected this guy over here, who's a firefighter 4 days a week, Howard T. Code, and he comes into the village 1 day a week and adjudicates traffic tickets. Yeah, I'd expect Brian would be able to influence that guy to like write the, but a federal judge, and then you're like, yep, it's the whole system. It's the whole system. This is their intention. So I filed that federal lawsuit on them on March 8th. Okay. Judge Howard T. Code was listed as a defendant in the federal lawsuit, as were the officers who were with Judge Code, right? And I want everybody to look at this video of what happened on that day when I went in on March 9th. So what the village lured me to Village Hall. They said, "Oh, Mrs. Weinstein, why don't you come pick up your papers?" And now I'm thinking, yeah, see, I filed a federal lawsuit, and now they know not to mess with me because they're going to get in trouble with the federal judge, right? So they're now going to start acting lawfully and do what they're supposed to. So naive, so wrong. Instead, what they did is they lured me to Village Hall to pick up papers. I showed up to pick up papers. I'm walking up the stairs. Detective Sergeant Frederick Galbraith, who was the man who was in charge of my husband's pedophilia investigation, who refused to take any evidence, stonewalled the investigation, refused to take testimony from my children and I. And then as soon as my husband kidnapped the kids, he then he closed the case as unfounded. Okay, so that's Detective Galbraith's amazing work for you. That guy, who is also a defendant in my federal case and one of the men involved in the prosecuting me for not wearing a mask in a public building, claiming it was disorderly conduct, which is a ticketed offense. It's a misdemeanor. You get a ticket and you go, and then you come back and you deal with it, right? Here they land me in solitary confinement for this.
For not having a mask.
Disorderly conduct initiated by not having a mask in a public building. And you'll just watch the video for yourself. There's nothing disorderly about me. I'm calm. I'm quiet the whole time. I'm just saying, you can't order me to leave. Just take my papers and I'll leave. Like, I've got a medical exemption. I'm standing 6 feet away from you. You're wearing masks. You're behind a plastic thing. They instead say they fabricate probable cause, which people think cops are racist, which there is an issue of racism in our court systems, because whenever any perpetrator goes after a victim, they first go after what they believe to be the easiest victims to create and control. And then once they master how to, create power over them and desecrate their rights, they then expand that practice into everybody. So I'm an affluent white woman in suburbia, right? So this isn't about racism. This is about a systemic practice of the police and the judges to then seek coercive control over anybody that they want. Okay. So then I filed this federal lawsuit. They then lured me to the Village Hall. Detective Galbraith jumped me from behind, kidnapped me, chained me to a wall. I have videos of all of this. I think you've seen these videos. And then because a friend had shown up and is filming through a crack of the door, right? Because at this point, like the harassment by the Briarcliff Manor Police had been severe. And in terms of the level of corruption, the Briarcliff Manor Police, because it seems like a beautiful little bucolic town, it's the heart of darkness. There's a man, I'm going to pronounce his name wrong. It's like Nick Tagliatole from Briarcliff Manor, who's a Briarcliff Manor Police, murdered 4 people, okay? And a drug deal that he was a dirty guy in a drug deal and buried the bodies in his yard. He's in jail and I don't know the outcome of the trial as of yet, or if the trial's actually happened. I know that it's been a long time and it's been, some interesting things happening, including the fact that this guy is with jailmates with Jeffrey Epstein. Okay, so I know that Briarcliff Manor has a link to the drug trade. I know that Briarcliff Manor has a link
Lizzie,
to.
I'm gonna stop you because I know like we're getting into all this other stuff. So we got to stick to your story because we're limited on time here. So we'll get to all that other stuff. Like that'll be like part 2, part 3. But we just want to like stick to you and your story because also we just like to your story. So so you got arrested for not having the mask and then he put you into, so that was all prior, right? So him illegally kidnapping you. So that wait, hold on one second. That's prior to the conservatorship, right? Like all this happened prior to that. So he's like basically like stacking like this setup against you. Exactly. Am I right? Is that what it? Okay.
Yeah. So his whole thing was, how do I use? He was trying to at first coerce me to just go by myself to this is going to be stressful for you. Why don't you just go to an inpatient psychiatric facility, Lizzie? I really love you. I care about you. Just go to an inpatient. And I'm like, dude, come on.
You're
I'm
like,
not
no, thank you.
stupid. Like, no, I'm not like,
When you were a nurse, right? So to you, him saying that is like, I'm sure as a nurse, you've dealt with patients that may have had some type of issues like that prior. So you're probably thinking, what are you on, right? Because you were a nurse, you've seen that.
well, here's the thing. You have to understand, but I had been indoctrinated my whole life by a predator myself, that that's why I ended up with a person like Brian, because he knew, he could see within me the ways in which he could control me. And this was the first time for both of us where I was really breaking out of his control, because before, I would be like, is there any reason? I didn't see nefarious intent in my husband, right? I couldn't figure out what was going on. I couldn't figure out why he was always trying to like talk about me having a psychiatric condition or my children having a psychiatric condition. Cause I was like, dude, why are you so obsessed with this? Like, what the, and now I realize, because this is what the pedophiles do, is that they want you to have some type of diagnosis that they can then point to that'll give them a cover for the pedophilia. So all of this, what you just said, is completely accurate. He was trying to stack, he was creating a story. He couldn't get me to go to a psychiatrist on my own that he would then buy and get a false diagnosis. So then he was using the cops and the police to and it's so funny because you watch a video and it's me speaking calmly, talking to the police, and the police will be like, a mental patient came into the office today to file forms. And I'm like, even just your commentary goes to show your prejudice and your nefarious intent. It's just so obvious
When a
to me.
police officer can't diagnose you as a mental patient,
I
I'm
know.
sorry.
It's like, it's the best thing ever, because I'm like, you guys are just pathetic. Like, this is all you've got. But then you find out that that's all they need, because the judge is like, just give me anything, and then I'll let you use the court to commit your crime, but you have to give me a little bit of something. So at first he was trying to get me to, he came and he used a bogus order of protection saying that I wrote, this is back in May, when he was missing and under a pedophilia investigation. On June 5th of 2020, the children were safe in my care, and they were affirmed safe by DSS and CPS, who the CPA, Child Protective Services, who were supposedly investigating my husband's pedophilia, which I now know they were working with my husband to try and like lay probable cause for all of this. And they were and by the Briarcliff police, who had been to my home several times over that course of time while my husband was missing and under this investigation, and affirmed my children were safe. Then they came on June 5th of 2020, two police officers. They assessed my home, my children. They said, your children are old enough. They want to stay with you. Everything's fine. And there's nothing else we can do here. And I'm like, right, so get out. Because they for 2 hours, which is a long time, they were trying to coerce my children to just leave and go with my pedophile husband. And they were like, no, we're not leaving her. We're not, like, we don't want to go with her, and we're happy and fine. And they're like, are you sure? Don't you just want to? And they were like, no. And so then after 2 hours on a Friday night, the police go to leave. My husband's pacing at the top of the driveway, and he gets a new order of protection, which is the mechanisms the courts are using. And again, this isn't just happening to mothers. I want you to understand. This is and that's what they want. They want the mothers and the fathers to fight. They want us to say, like, you're lying and you're an abusive man. And instead, what we need to do is unify and see that this is an issue of the courts as a mechanism to take away our children, to traffic our children, either through familial trafficking or through the use of foster homes and foster care into these pedophile situations, right? So we need to bind together to focus on this and understand that even though you tell the stories of other women, and I'm a woman in this situation, that I equally have other fathers, not in the same numbers, but I have fathers that have the exact same set of facts where they are falsely accused of something, no evidence, nothing whatsoever. They then are given an order of protection. They're evicted from the home. They're never giving a trial. That's the important part.
And that's how this has all happened to you, right? You
Yep.
mean you were like they evicted you from your home, they like put you into this illegal conservatorship. Like it was just like a process. And I mean, when this was happening, did you see like Did you think it was going to get here, or did you
No,
think in
at
your head,
every
like,
at every step, I kept thinking they're getting so desperate that they're then going to back themselves in a corner, because there's no way, like they're going to put me in jail. And then I'm like, holy shit, like they literally locked me in solitary confinement over not wearing a mask. And then Judge Code remanded me there for 7 weeks, denied me a lawyer, denied me access to an arraignment, and remanded me there for 7 weeks. That just goes to show how dirty he is, right? On a misdemeanor charge that doesn't even require jail time, nor does it require a bond. So before I'm even found guilty of that charge, I should be out on my own. I can't be in jail over this stuff. But the reason they put me in jail is because my husband was using, after he kidnapped the kids, was trying to get me to go see a forensic, to determine custody for the kids. We should have a forensic evaluation. I was like, no, our kids are 17, 16, and 13. They get to decide where they want to live. I'm not going to have some forensic guy be paid thousands of dollars so that you can manipulate him and pay. But it's so obvious that that's what they do. The courts, then they don't listen to evidence. What they do is they manufacture evidence, not even evidence, but they manufacture probable cause by using these appeals to authority, hiring authority figures, such as a forensic interview, such as a, expert, in the field, and those opinions then take the place of the evidence in the court. So my husband wanted me to see forensic, and I was like, no, I see what you're doing. You can't get a psychiatric diagnosis of me, so you're trying to withhold my kids and say, go see this forensic in order to see your children? No. And I'll force that issue every day. My kids are brilliant, and they get to decide where they go. So then in January, when he realized, like, oh, shoot, that's not happening, he then, I then get arrested. And they're like, oh, you want to get out of jail? We'll see this psychiatrist then, and we'll let you get out of jail. I mean, it's so obvious. And they were like, oh, we're keeping you in jail because we don't know if you're competent enough to stand trial.
that's ridiculous, because it's
Yes.
that's just,
And it was
another form of abuse.
It was January 2021, and you have to understand they were letting people criminals out of jail because of COVID. And you're saying you think that there's any, like, the people are going to believe that I'm in here because I need a psychiatric evaluation?
Did you see one to get out, or how did you get out?
So this is what people need to understand. A 730 exam, right, for court, it is the lowest bar. Okay. It means, do you know the charges that are against you? Do you know the people in the courtroom? And do you know how long you would serve if you were found guilty of the charges? That's it. That's it. Now, I am at the time a 49-year-old woman living and functioning independently and representing myself pro se, on 4 or 5 different cases at that time. Okay. So what information do you have that I'm not only do you not have information that I'm incompetent to understand, I literally told Judge Code, I was like, when he held a virtual arraignment, I said, Judge Code, I'm being held on the charges of disorderly conduct and obstruction of administration too. I was not disorderly, and there was no obstruction in any way. It's a misdemeanor charge. You put on the obstruction because it comes with a year jail sentence. You're trying to up the charges against me to put a little more pressure on me. My name's Elizabeth Harding Weinstein. The date is January 5th of 2021. You're the judge. That's the dirty DA. That's it, right? So there's your competency exam, Judge Code. And he goes, too bad. I'm going to let the psychiatrist decide. So the psychiatrist, who is this guy, Michael Kuhn, comes to the jail, and I refuse to see him. I said, no, I know my rights, and I'm denying I do not have to participate in any medical care whatsoever. And I'm denying you access. No. And so then Michael Coons goes and lies and just creates a whole report saying that he believed that I had bipolar disease, which is what my husband was trying to diagnose me with, which even if I did, but anybody having bipolar disease, that doesn't mean that you're incompetent and incapable and you can harm somebody. It also is a protected class if you look it up under the American with Disabilities Act. So if I did have bipolar disease, it would be illegal, right? It would be discriminatory for you to evict me from my home, take my children, and not let me prosecute and defend myself because you're saying that I have a disease. It's insane. But this is how within the house of cards. This is all that the government needs, is something that's done. So that again happened in January. Okay. Then I filed the federal lawsuit in March. Then the Judge Code, who's a defendant in my federal case, has me kidnapped, chained to a wall, then puts me back in jail with no criminal charges. He's like, Mrs. Weinstein, I'm declaring you incompetent. And so I'm throwing out all the charges against you. And I was like, Judge Code, you can't declare me incompetent. There's no trial. There's no hearing. There's no cross-examining of witnesses. I have no lawyer. Like, this is, you denied me notice of a trial or hearing. This is all improper. And you're just doing this because I filed a federal lawsuit against you. And I don't want you to throw out the charges because I'm suing you for malicious prosecution. And malicious prosecution requires adjudication in my favor, right? So
Right.
I clearly know what I'm talking about here. He says, too bad, and now you're going back to jail. And I was like, Judge Code, if you're declaring me incompetent and I'm not competent to stand trial, why are you putting me in jail? Wouldn't tell me. Puts me back in jail. And then when he finds out that a lawyer's coming down to get me out, because I'm on the phone, I was allowed a phone call from the cell, and the call's recorded. And within minutes of me, this woman saying, hey, I found somebody, they're coming down, this is sick, they're coming down to get you out. I'm like, great. 4 cops bust in my cell and they're like, get up, we're transferring you. And I'm like, where are you transferring me to? They're like, we don't have to tell you. And I'm like, yeah, you do. And it turns out that they're transferring me to one of the hospitals that my husband contracted with 7 months earlier, May of 2020, to get a false diagnosis of me. So then they send me back to this place in Harrison. It used to be called Four Winds. It's now called St. Vincent's Hospital. And I get there and I say, no, I'm a previous ER ICU nurse. This is all in retaliation for filing a federal lawsuit against a judge. And you have to understand, they've got me shackled at my feet with the chains wrapped. They've got me shackled at my waist and they've got my hands chained. And this is how they bring you, right? Shackled in handcuffs to the psychiatric facility. And they're expecting me to react. And instead I just say completely calm. My name is Elizabeth Harding Weinstein. I'm of sound mind and body. I'm fully competent and I'm no threat to myself or others. And that is so important because under mental health and hygiene law 9.01 to 9.35 in New York State and in most states, and people should look this up to see what your law is in your state, you have to have suicidal or homicidal ideations proven in order to be kept against your will in a mental facility. And I'm specifically saying I don't have any suicidal or homicidal ideations. I'm a threat to nobody. So they have it doesn't matter if they're like, oh, we think that you're having delusions and that you need help. It doesn't matter. That's why there are so many homeless people in New York City. Because if they're not suicidal or homicidal, we can't take them and put them in a psychiatric facility. You understand?
Right.
So,
right. Okay.
And I know you're winding up on time. So
yeah.
the
So
short
let me
answer
I just want to know, and then answer it like just really short, like one or two sentences. How long were you in there?
Okay,
and then,
so I was
and then how'd you get out?
I was in there for 4 weeks, and for 2 weeks I just refused all medical care. And
So 11
then,
weeks imprisoned completely.
Oh no! I'm sorry. Okay, so
well, like 7 weeks and then 4 weeks in the hospital. So like all together.
Okay, no. So what happened? So Judge Code remanded me there for 7 weeks on January 5th. And said I have to undergo psychiatric treatment for 7:30 competency exam, which by the way takes about 20 minutes. It's at most an hour. So explain the 7 weeks. But I was able to get myself out earlier. I got myself out on on January 9th. Okay, so I was in there for a total of 5 days, from June 4th to I'm sorry, on the 8th. So the 4th, the 5th, the 6th, the 7th, the 8th, and I was released on the 8th. Those were the days that I was in there. I then was out, fully functional and independent for 2 months, filed the federal lawsuit. Then they had me kidnapped, put back in prison with no charges, then put in the medical facility, okay, and imprisoned me there and poisoned me there. And then once there, the process started all over again. They want your compliance. Just say you're crazy and take this medication and we'll let you go. And I'm like, first of all, you're a liar. No, you won't. And they're like, why won't you do this for your kids? And I'm like, I would do anything for my children, but I know you're lying. You're not going to let me go if I say I'm crazy and lie and just say, whatever you want me to say about my husband. You're going to use that against me. So no, of course I'm not going to do that, because the best thing for my kids is that I'm always the same person. So for 2 weeks, they tried to coerce me to take medication. They used to break in my room at night. The doctors used to walk by with Haldol needles and be like, "You're never getting out of here. If you leave, you're going to be so incapacitated. You're not going to even know how to function." And they would do this to other patients too, who would cry. I would turn around and look at them and be like, "Dr. Katan, what's wrong with you?
Right.
Did you literally go to med school so that you can?" So
right.
then I was
well,
in
and
there.
we're gonna get to all of that, of the
Yes.
corruption of all of them. We're just
Okay.
sticking to your story. So one last question, because I'm on a hard stop today.
Yes.
Where are you at now? And are you still in this conservatorship? And like, and like, just, and don't talk about anybody else, just like how long you're in it and what needs to be done to get you out of
Thank you. So yes, so basically my husband had no medical evidence, including the hospital admissions, towards this conservatorship. What he used is the diagnosis of that psychiatrist who never saw me in January of 2021. He put it into, I had filed contempt motions against him for failure to pay support, housing, and allow me to see my children. Okay, that was going on for about a year. And then I filed a second federal case against them. And in response, in May of, I believe it was May 24th, although I could have that date wrong, he then filed for conservatorship over me. Now, this is my legal adversary and a defendant in multiple federal cases and appellate court cases, filing to say, I want conservatorship over the plaintiff in my case. I mean, it should have been thrown out in a minute. Instead, and the only thing that he had was, he said, "Oh, I've got the psychiatrist from the prison in January from a criminal misdemeanor charge on not wearing a mask, saying that he believes she's crazy. And the reason he believes she's crazy is because she said that her husband is trying to get a diagnosis of her. And that's crazy."
So
that's what they do.
So you're in it. So how do you get out of it? Like, what are they telling you have to do to get out of it?
They won't say. They won't say anything. I've given them, I want you to understand, they didn't give me a guardianship of person. They gave me a guardianship of property. So I live and function independently. I work independently. I'm completely responsible for myself in any way. I don't have any contact with this guardian, except when he writes to me, and when he doesn't, I'm supposed to get access to my money. The guardian then went and he seized all of my money from my husband, what my husband was supposed to be paying me in these supports since I filed for divorce from him, which we didn't even really get into any of that. But after I filed for divorce, he would pay me 1 month and then not pay me for months. So the guy was like, "Oh, I took all of those," because he was trying to pay her. She wouldn't take the money. And then
this is millions, right? Millions of dollars in houses, multiple houses.
Yes, my assets are valued in the millions. The amount that he was handling in cash due to my support was in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. It wasn't in the millions that I was owed that they weren't giving to me. So he then, this guy's name is Kenneth L. Bunting, and he's in White Plains, New York, a dirty guy, seizes all of my money and is trying to coerce me to meet privately with him in New York, which I refused to do, right? Because I had moved out of the state prior to any of this case being filed against me. So the New York courts don't even have jurisdiction over me. You understand? Like, I live in Connecticut. Like, so you can't bring a case in New York for guardianship when the person resides in another state. It's very clear that under 81 New York State mental health and hygiene law 81.04 jurisdiction, look it up. There's only 3 conditions. You have to live in the state, you have to not live in the state, but you're present in the state when they're filing, or you have to be an international person traveling with guardianship. I meant none of that. They trafficked me into the guardianship. Janet C. Malone held ex parte hearings, denied me access to the hearing, wouldn't give me virtual access to the court in order to be heard on jurisdiction, denied me witnesses, denied me transcripts. So I can't even know what's being said in these hearings, okay? And then they sealed the case, gave me this guardianship. This guardian, Kenneth Bunting, took all of my assets, and he kept trying to coerce me to meet with him. I refused. So then he went and found where I had any money left in a bank that I was secretly using to feed myself and get by. And in October of 2021, he was appointed in August as guardian of property. In October 2021, he then went, seized that account, closed the account, withdrew my federal cases against the defendants, and then took possession of a separate duplicate divorce case, took service for my
Wait, real
husband.
quick. How, if he's not guardian of you, but guardian of property, how is he able to withdraw the federal cases?
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, guys, any before we go, any last words? And I guess I wouldn't say her case is like so big that you cannot. I mean, we'd be on a 5 hour long
Yeah.
call, I'm sure. So
Yeah.
we are going to do multiple parts with Lizzie, because I think it's important, and I think that that's when she's telling her story. There's so much to it that where it's like I'm trying to piece it together for you guys and keep her aware. But like, just understand that there's so much more to
Yeah.
this than just what she's saying. So we intend to do multiple parts with her. Before we go, and I don't mean to cut you guys off. I'm just on a really
Yeah.
hard stop
Yeah.
today. But again, I mean, I'm going to do whatever I can to help Lizzie. I keep, guys start using the hashtag, hashtag free Lizzie
Please.
Harding.
That's the
Um,
best way to follow me and to follow with my story, because what's happening is they keep cutting out my accounts, but that hashtag doesn't get cut out. So if you want to follow along and be able to find out what's happening, this issue of taking conservatorship over competent people to seize custody of their children, to seize their assets, to prevent them access to the victim so that the predator can have full totalitarian control over their victims is a very, very common practice right now. And it started again with a population that gets discriminated against a lot, with an elderly population and with our mentally disabled. And then once they were able to so easily control those people, then they started expanding it. Let's expand it to elderly population not incapacitated. Okay, well, now let's expand it to any person
yeah.
and just take their assets. And that's what's happening right now. And so, and again, my husband, Brian Stryker Weinstein, is on the Duke University Keenan Institute for Ethics. So you have to question what that institution is pushing as part of their ethical agenda. Okay. They have somebody who is a known pedophile and asked to have his wife say what you want about me, but I have lived independently my whole adult life. So you have no evidence that I need any help. And he had asked on paper, on record, to have me placed in a long-term care facility and be forced medications over objection for an indefinite period, because it's the only way to help her. If he's willing to put those requests in writing, you have to think of the sociopathic mindset of this man and the power that we're giving him, both in his position as a partner at Davis Polk and Wardwell, propagating case law in our most influential federal courts, and then and state court in New York, and as a board member of one of our highest, most esteemed institutions in our country.
Well, Lizzie, I appreciate you so much. I mean, you're so brave, and I know that you are fighting like heck. And the next one that we do, you get everyone. We haven't even gotten into what happened with her kids. That is like a whole nother story of like the conservatorship. And so I know that that's going to take some time to get through. And I know it's really emotional for her. So I definitely want her to tell that side of the story as well, because they're not only entrapping her and enslaving her, they're doing this to the children as well. And so I wanted to I was on a hard stop of time. So the next time I interview her, because it is within regards to our children, I want to give her the platform and the time that she needs to be able to explain it, however long that takes. I mean, I don't think it'll take 5 hours, but it might take an hour and a half just for her to explain it. Do you have any last words?
No, I ask that people become very aware of your mental health and hygiene laws in your area. If police, DSS, CPS show up at your house, don't let them in the door. Ask to see warrants, ask to see identifying information for this, and just tell them that you're going to get representation and get back in touch with them. Do not trust these people. They
Just don't
are
open your
mechanisms.
door.
We are in a system right now that is currently ratcheting up its use of police, of child protective services, and of the courts to kidnap and traffic people. And they're doing it through, medical kidnapping. They're doing it through CPS kidnapping. They're doing it through police kidnapping. And with the end goal being that they're trying to separate children from
loving, supportive parents. That is the trend, that you can see it in your own schools. You can see it with the lowering age of consent. You can see it with the schools driving a wedge, trying to say, like, your parents don't understand you, but we do. So come and get, sex changing drugs without their notice, right? Like, this is the overreaching thing that applies to everybody's life, is that they are being, the courts, the police, and child protective services are being used by mechanisms by which to kidnap us and kidnap our children, with the end goal of separating children from parents, because traumatized children are more easily manipulated and controlled as adults. And
Yes.
that's where we're headed. So we need to stop this practice and end these cycles of not only the generational abuse, but by the government abuse.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lizzie. Thank you
you.
everyone for tuning in. We will get her on the schedule soon. I know I'm getting called out probably here in the next week or two for an extraction. So we will have her back when I get on. And then I actually want to do maybe with her and someone else that I'm thinking of that have similar stories. So we love you. We appreciate you. Thank you again, Lizzie.
Madyson, thank you